This is a very interesting statistic that comes from an educational journal. Classroom ecosystems, which mirror real-world collaboration, were found to increase learning by at least 20%. I think this is very thought-provoking. And when we think about what the definition of an ecosystem, which is a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment, I think, yeah, that statistic doesn't seem so far-fetched. When we think about the classroom ecosystem and the interacting organisms, which would be, of course, our students and our teachers, and that physical environment, which we hope is leveraged as that third teacher, creating this real wonderful synergy within the classroom. Hopefully our teachers are designing interactive activities and experiences for our students to where they are truly collaborating in the classroom so that they're able to speak to one another, listen to one another. And the teachers there serving not only as a facilitator, but an activator of knowledge. I can really see this rich ecosystem being leveraged to help all students, particularly our English language learners. This is an interesting statistic that probably won't surprise you. This data is actually from 2015, so I have a feeling that by now it's probably increased, but I couldn't find any data that was more recent. This is from TESOL, so it shows the percentages from each state within the United States as far as how many ELLs there are registered within our public schools. We know that the ELL population is the fastest growing population within our public schools now, and approximately 6 million students are registered right now, but we know that number is increasing every year. The goals, of course, for our English language learners is to help them acquire this second language, and for some students it may be a third language. And what we need to really be doing in the classroom is helping our students to be able to read in English, write in English, speak in English, and listen and be able to comprehend in English to build up their language skills with our English language. It's important for our teachers to remember that we need to be separating these two. There's two skills that we need to be fostering within our experiences we're designing for our students. The language skills, which are the skills, of course, to be able to speak and read and write and listen, but also those content skills, which is what they're going to learn in their academic course classrooms. Those content skills will be taught, according to that subject matter, but remembering that to create an environment that's going to really be able to foster a student's ability to become fluent in English, it takes special skill. So what would an environment look like that would be able to really help support and foster language acquisition for our students? When I look at both images on the screen, I go back to my time in the classroom, and I know whenever I was starting out as a teacher, I know there were times when my classroom looked like that on the right. And sadly, when I later on, of course, learned more, I learned that the classroom on the left is the classroom that's really going to do the most help in helping our English language learners to be able to acquire English at a deeper level and a faster level. Because there's really only two ways we ever know what's happening in a student's brain, and that's to see what they're writing, and that's to hear what they're saying. And if we want our ELLs to be able to speak English fluently, we have to give them opportunity, and we also have to create an environment that's going to allow them to do that. So of course the environment on the left shows that where students are able to talk to one another in English, be able to listen to one another and comprehend one another in English, be able to write in English with one another and not feel threatened by anything. All of these rich things we can design within the classroom for our English language learners is what's going to get to this great space to where we reach that goal of helping our students acquire English with their ability to read, write, speak, and listen. As educators, we actually wear two different hats. I mean, we wear many hats, of course, but the two I want to focus on right now are that of the designer and then that of when the teacher is serving as the facilitator or activator. So designing these spaces is really important, and not just the physical environment, but designing the experiences within. So it really is up to the educator to design a space where students can come in and know that a culture lives there that fosters growth mindset, that it's okay to take risks, because learning the second language is hard. It's very scary. Designing the classroom where there are word walls that are rich with images so that students can always have a place to look at and have a great resource for acquiring language, but having an image to gravitate towards. Designing collaborative spaces within the ecosystem so that students understand they are going to be able to speak to one another, listen to one another, work with one another. Teacher proximity is a very important piece to any ecosystem, especially for our English language learners. So ensuring that the educator has designed a spot for him or herself in the middle of the space so that he or she is able to quickly get in there while students are working to help reassure, to help monitor, to help with any language needs they may have. Designing cave zones. We're going to talk about learning zones shortly, but designing spaces where students are able to go and work autonomously and have some quiet time. And then also designing lessons where they're built in 20-minute chunks. We're going to talk a little bit about some neuroscience here in a little bit and why the brain works best with 20-minute chunks of time. Also, as the educator, they serve as a role of a facilitator and hopefully an activator. So in that ecosystem, our educators are fostering that growth mindset, not just putting up posters about it, but truly fostering it and creating a space where English language learners feel comfortable trying to speak the language, trying to write in this new foreign language. The facilitators actually going to these visual word walls and referencing them so students are able to know where to look when they need help. Teachers are facilitating that collaboration, so they're designing tasks where students have to collaborate with one another, where there might be some conflict, and they're able to get in there and help with that. Also facilitating themselves as they're walking around, having close proximity to all of their students. Facilitating that ability to choose that choice of seating that hopefully the teacher feels comfortable allowing students to have control and be able to choose where they want to sit so they feel comfortable and less anxious in the class. And then also the facilitation of their lecture style or their lesson style where they're only teaching, direct teaching for 20-minute chunks of time. So designing an environment that really fosters that growth mindset is critical for all students, especially our English language learners, because it is very scary to go into a new country, to go into a new school system, and be acquiring a language and wanting to fit in with your peers. So helping teachers to be able to foster that growth mindset is really critical at the district's level. We want this to be a risk-free environment where students learning a foreign language feel comfortable to be able to take risks, to be able to try and speak with one another, to be able to try and write in English and not feel ridiculed for it. So what would a classroom like that look like? Well, at Meteor, we always say the environment is never neutral. And students know instantly when they walk into a classroom whether this is more of a teacher-centered classroom that might have a larger footprint where the teacher is, or is this more of a student-driven classroom where students are able to talk with each other, able to learn from one another. So a space immediately speaks to all of us. Students tend to go into spaces and either feel anxious or they feel inspired. So setting up a really happy, warm space with lots of soft seating and choices and maybe rugs on the floor makes for an inviting space for our English language learners. Having things up on the wall that might be in their second language to help them feel less anxious and less nervous about the fact that they are an English language learner can really help set the culture immediately for that ecosystem. Those interactive word walls with pictures that I talked about earlier, these are an important piece built into hopefully every English language learner class. So hopefully the students are able to not only reference them, but also help build these interactive word walls. So perhaps the teacher writes the word, but the students can draw an image and then go up to those word walls. And then the teacher also referencing them as needed so the student always knows where to look. It's important for the teacher to think about some open floor space around these interactive word walls so students are able to truly interact with them and go up and find the word and touch the word and remember where the word is. So that's a piece that could be important for teachers to remember as they are designing their classrooms and leaving space for students to take ownership of those interactive word walls. Another piece for our English language learners with the design aspects would be collaborative arrangements. If our goal is to help our English language learners be able to speak English fluently, we need to give them opportunities for that. And to give them opportunities for that, it helps to design the physical space so that is set up. Because when students walk into a space and they see their desks in rows, they probably feel like they're not going to be able to speak much in that classroom. But when students walk into a classroom where their desks push together, or they see that their desks are able to be moved because they're on casters and can turn, that can help them feel more at ease that this is a space I'm going to be able to talk to one another and learn from one another. Also at the younger levels, we also want our students to be able to work on tasks together, of course, teaching one another, learning from one another. But the arrangement of the class being set up where students are able to collaborate is an important piece to any classroom. Teacher proximity is important for all of our learners, particularly for our English language learners. So being able as a teacher to get in there, work with our students, hear what they're saying, being able to reassure them, monitor what they're saying, get in there to make any corrections that might be needed so that what they're learning is not going into that long-term memory incorrectly, because it's more difficult to unlearn something and then relearn it than it is to learn it correctly the first time. It's important for the teacher to, again, consider that physical layout of the space so that the teacher is able to walk around as well. If the teacher is stationed more in the center of the classroom, it's very easy for either of them, for the teacher to be able to get in there, help students, reassure students, and guide students. The utilization of technology and the advancements in technology are amazing, and there are so many great tools that are out there for all students, but particularly for our English language learners. So whether a teacher is working to allow Google Translate within the classroom so that students who might be newcomers can easily feel less anxious as they're trying to translate words. Also thinking about the apps that are out there to where students can listen to music or hopefully create music and move up in the SAMR model to where they're actually creating things. These are great pieces that are available for our students. But one thing that we know we've seen a lot of schools is that there are great programs out there for English language learners to listen to the English language and see visuals. But what is sad to see is when students are just stuck behind that device and they're in a silo and they're still not practicing that speaking ability. So there are great pieces of innovative furniture that are out there where maybe monitors are on the wall so that students are still able to sit and collaborate with one another, speak to one another, and then share maybe what it is they're writing in their computer program up on the screen to get feedback and get help with that. As we think about the wall space within our classrooms, we want our English language learners and know that our English language learners are completely capable of creating anything that any student can create with appropriate scaffolding, of course. But then thinking about how the student can share that with their peers, with their teacher, or hopefully with an authentic audience so that they're able to still speak about what it is they're creating. Those are important things to think about with the design elements of a classroom. Earlier I mentioned the cave zones, and there are 4 particular learning zones that I want to talk about now. One is the cave zone. So we know that the real world is not all collaboration 24/7. That's not how anybody's job really is. There's time for collaboration, but there's time to work autonomously. And cave zones are perfect for that autonomous time to work. So whether a teacher allows students to create their own cave space, like this young man did, I love it, or where teachers have cave zones set up in the classroom where students know that it's okay to go to that cave zone whenever he or she feels like they need it. It's a great place for students to be able to go and read on their own, listen to an audiobook or a program on their own. It's a great place to reflect. We know that after students have some new information given to them, they need to be able to take that from the external knowledge into that internal belief. And so a cave zone really supports that. The watering hole is another learning zone that is a great space within an ecosystem. It's a very informal space where students can come together and kind of have this incubator for their ideas to be shared. So it's great when the teacher is able to have that close proximity to students. And if the teacher hears some trending questions or trending topics that teams are talking about, the teacher could recommend, hey guys, why don't we all come to the watering hole and talk about that, because that seems to be coming up quite a bit. Or students can hopefully go to the watering hole on their own. The Campfire Expert Zone is a very critical zone to any classroom. It's a space for small group workshops. So whether the teacher calls students over to the Campfire Expert Zone to help close up any gaps or teach a new skill or challenge students that need that challenge, that's an important place where a teacher could do that. Or hopefully, whenever teachers feel more comfortable and are moving to that truly student-driven classroom, students are able to teach one another, and they can be the campfire expert over in that zone. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the life zone, the makerspace zone. So whether it's a small space at the back of a classroom where students are able to get hands on and create something to show their learning, whether it's a visual, a poster, anything that is creative for them to showcase their learning, this is a great space for that. Or whether a campus has a true makerspace classroom where students can go and again, showcase what it is they've learned. These are great zones to have in a space. Neuroscience talks about that 20-minute chunk of time is really important whenever teachers are designing lessons and facilitating lessons. So 20-minute chunks of time are what the brain shows it can handle for new information, and then it needs a refresh. And so as teachers are particularly for their English language learners, giving a lesson, giving direct instruction, it's important to watch their time and know to stop, to give students time to talk about that information, create something with that information, reflect on that information in their journal. So again, just thinking about that when it comes to the human brain, what it can take. I studied in Japan for a semester, and I never really understood this 20-minute chunk of time until I went to study there because I was not fluent in Japanese. But that's exactly about the time my brain would start to tune out. It was after 20 minutes. That's all my brain could take, and then I needed just a brain break, and then I could come back, learn more. So I became very empathetic to my English language learners through that experience. The next group of learners I want to talk about are struggling readers. And so we know that there are so many skills that go into creating a fluent reader. Those decoding skills, of course, those foundational skills that lead to the vocabulary, the text structures, and of course the ultimate goal for that comprehension and that fluency. As teachers, as educators, we have a heavier lift than we used to have with regards to reading. You know, a lot of students are coming to school with that 30 million word gap. And so it's very important that we help our struggling readers, of course, at the lower levels, but even no matter if it goes up all the way to their senior level, that we're designing spaces and designing lessons that help close up the gaps for our students. So here we have two examples of campfire expert zones. These are very important zones to help our struggling readers. So where teachers have a space to call back students, to help with particular skills, to close up any gaps. But also, of course, not forgetting about our students that need to be challenged, helping them as well. But we can see the design of these spaces is very intentional, that the teacher has a space to call students back, to have that really close proximity, to have these really, really important lessons focus on particular reading strategies, but then also space around the classroom for students to go practice these skills, lay on the floor, have some soft seating options to go practice and work with their reading abilities. Another great strategy to help our struggling readers, especially when it comes to growth mindset, is goal setting. So thinking about spaces within the classroom where a teacher can have goals set up for students, or hopefully it moves to the point to where the student is helping set his or her own goals. But it's important to remember we need to celebrate whenever students achieve these goals. So whether it's through paper badges or digital badges, there's a way to celebrate as students are working on their reading ability, reaching these goals, so that they are really continuing to stay motivated to continue to work on their reading skills. A reading timeline is another great strategy. So it showcases all the accomplishments a student has made to showcase their growth that they've made as a reader. When considering the physical environment for readers, it's important to think about a space where students can feel comfortable, and the different types of furniture options that are out there are incredible, because we want to create, of course, lifelong learners, but hopefully we're also creating lifelong readers, and hopefully we're also letting our students know that text is everywhere. It's not just in books. So setting up spaces where students can go and relax with a book of their choice, a book of the topic that they like. Also, of course, spaces where students have a spot to listen to someone read. Hearing that fluent reading is so important for students to create that imagery and that visualization that we need them to be able to do on their own when they're reading. Spaces such as dramatic play are also really important. So students are reading for a purpose. So if I'm reading a book or reading a play and then I'm going to be acting it out, that creates an authentic audience, that creates a real world experience. So thinking about spaces like that in a media center are really, really important. For older students, it's important to think about comfortable seating for them as well, because now we see them moving into having book clubs and literature circles, and that comfortable seating where they're going to be able to read for extended periods of time and then have these hopefully great discussions about the story and analyzing the story. It's really important to sit somewhere comfortable. So we can see that students, whether they're reading something digital or listening to something digital, they want to be comfortable. They want to be able to sit where they want to with fun pillows or on comfortable rugs. So thinking about that and being intentional about that when you're designing your classroom or purchasing furniture is very important. Here we see great options that are out there for students to go sit and listen to a story autonomously or read online. So thinking about where we want our students to be able to read and what would be comfortable for them is an important consideration for your environment. Now moving to our students with autism spectrum disorder. It's important to think about what challenges they may be facing in the classroom and how to target particular ways to help them with any challenges they may be having. So whether they have social differences or communicative differences or behavioral differences, there are strategies and there are ideas we can do to help them. So in classrooms where we have more collaboration going on, it tends to be noisier. And for students on the autism spectrum, that can be really overwhelming for them. So thinking about having a space just for them would be a consideration I would recommend. So whether you take a piece of your flexible furniture and move it in the hall, so it's a home base for that student. So he or she feels that it's their space, they feel protected, that their stuff is going to be okay. And it's a space for them to go, where it's a nice quiet zone for them to think and not become overwhelmed and anxious. Also thinking about visuals on the wall to help students manage their time. Hopefully teachers that have students with autism spectrum disorder are designing their lessons and tasks on autism time, which means that the students have twice as much time to accomplish half as much as what a student without autism spectrum may have. But also thinking, so thinking about those tools that could be up on the board or on the wall for students to be able to access and see how much time they have helps them manage their anxiety, helps them be able to manage the tasks that they're assigned to do. Also thinking about lighting and different spaces and comfortable spaces is important for our autism spectrum students. It's incredible to think about all of the innovative pieces of furniture that are out there, like the image on the right, that create these noise barriers. So students with autism spectrum disorder may be able to go sit back there and it drowns out some noise, so they feel there's a comfortable space that they can go work and accomplish their goals. Thank you so much. I hope I've given you some information that will help you with regards to our English language learners, our struggling readers, and students with autism spectrum disorder. Some deliberate actions you might want to consider as you go back out into your classrooms or out into your district would be to be able to go out and assess your current learning environments. Are there zones that you see set up, or are there spaces where zones could be set up for students? As you walk around, are you able to assess teacher proximity? Are teachers able to get in there quickly and access students and help? You might, if you found this information helpful, hopefully you can share this webinar with a colleague and have some discussion about any implications it may have for your campus or your district. If you have any other further questions or want to have a more detailed conversation, I recommend that you please contact Sebastian Sanchez. He'll put you in touch with your local learning environment specialist, and below is his email address. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful evening.